Powerful Magic. One evening, a group of hill tribesmen from a village near Acariya Mun's residence began wondering among themselves whether Acariya Mun had any magic formulas to ward off and chase away ghosts. So they decided to go the next day to ask if he had anything he could give them. Early the next morning, Acariya Mun related this incident to the monks living with him. Last night, while sitting in meditation, I overheard a group of hill tribesmen in the village wondering if we monks might have some magic formulas for warding off and chasing away ghosts. They intend to come here today to ask us about it. Should they come, give them the formula Buddho Dhammo Sangho to meditate on. It's an excellent formula against ghosts, for the only thing that ghosts fear in this world are the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Not a single ghost would dare stand against them. That morning, just as Acariya Mun had foreseen, the hill tribesmen came to request a magic formula against ghosts. Acariya Mun gave them the formula Buddho Dhammo Sangho, as well as the method for using it. Assuring them that ghosts were terrified of this formula, he told them to mentally recite Buddho, Dhammo, or Sangho, whichever they preferred. With Acariya Mun's instructions fresh in their minds, they began what they thought to be a ritual for warding off ghosts, unaware that, in truth, he had given them a meditation subject. Using this method, they attained samadhi before long. The next morning they rushed off to see Acariya Mun and told him what had happened. He assured them that they were practicing the formula correctly, and because of that, ghosts in the area were terrified and bound to run away. Now protected by the power of Dhamma, they no longer had to fear ghosts. In fact, ghosts had already begun to fear even those people in the village who couldn't yet meditate. Being inherently good, honest folks, hill tribe people were easy to teach. When Acariya Mun instructed them to meditate each day, they took up the practice with such sincerity that before long some of them were getting exceptionally good results. Their hearts became brightly illuminated, and they were able to know the minds of other people, including those of the monks in the monastery, just like the man in the previous story about tigers in disguise. On visits to the monastery, they spoke to Acariya Mun about their meditation practice, describing their extraordinary perceptual abilities. Some of the monks were astonished and worried that these people might be able to read their thoughts. Though timid by nature, they nonetheless wanted to find out what the people knew. They couldn't resist the temptation of asking for specific information about their own thoughts. The hill tribesmen told them the truth. Still not convinced, the monks challenged them. Unfazed by a display of their own ignorance, they cross-examined the hill tribesmen closely to find out if they truly could read thoughts. It was as though they believed that their minds were tightly sealed by hundreds of impenetrable layers. The hill tribesmen answered with the customary frankness of forest people who are uninhibited by social formalities, answers which left the monks feeling very vulnerable. After that, they remained apprehensive that these people might have access to everything they were thinking. These same hill tribesmen casually informed Acariya Mun that they knew about the state of his chitta, having checked it out first, before checking on that of the other monks. "What's my chitta like? Is it afraid of ghosts?" "Your chitta is devoid of all traces of conventional reality. All that's left is nibbana in a human body. Your chitta is absolutely supreme. It fears nothing." After that, the villagers made no further mention of ghosts. Those accomplished in meditation informed the others, who gradually came to have faith in Acariya Mun and the Buddhasasana, thus losing interest in the business of ghosts. Every morning, they gathered together in the village center to offer alms to the monks. Having placed some food in each monk's bowl, they received a blessing from Acariya Mun. He taught them to show their appreciation by exclaiming sadhu together in a loud voice, allowing the devas to rejoice in their offerings and receive a portion of the merit as well. Each day, the villagers responded faithfully by loudly calling out sadhu. Acariya Mun had them exclaim sadhu, for he knew from the devas, who came to hear his Dhamma talks every night, that this sound reached them in the realms where they lived. Hearing this sound, they knew that Acariya Mun was living in the area. Devas who visited Acariya Mun were invariably escorted by a leader who was in charge of the group. These groups represented many different realms of existence. Some were terrestrial devas from near and far. Many were from the various celestial realms mentioned in the Buddhist texts. When a group of Devas intended to pay Acariya Mun a visit, he always knew their time of arrival in advance. If he knew, for instance, that a group intended to arrive at 2 or 3 a.m., he would take some rest beforehand, getting up to enter samadhi only when the time approached to receive them. If, however, they were scheduled to arrive around midnight, he would first enter and then wait for them in samadhi. This was accomplished in 2 stages. First, he practiced normal meditation until he attained a deep state of calm, where he rested for a while. Then, as the time approached, he withdrew to just the right meditative level to receive his intended visitors. There, he knew intuitively whether or not they had arrived, or whether they were still on their way. Having acknowledged their arrival, he then discussed with them whatever seemed appropriate for their particular circumstances. Had he remained in a deep state of samadhi, his visitors would not have been able to have access to him. In normal waking consciousness, on the other hand, one would have to be a very skilled person indeed to be able to acknowledge and interact with beings from other realms. Even were he able to acknowledge them, it would still be easier to accomplish this at the appropriate level of samadhi. For this reason, Upatada Samadhi, the access gate, is a level suitable to nearly every eventuality. Acariya Mun became an expert in these matters during his sojourn at Sarika cave many years before. At that time, he had been an ordained monk for 22 years. By the time he passed away, after spending a total of 60 years in the robes, he had become a true master of these matters. Everyone in the world has the same potential for perceiving such phenomena as Acariya Mun. They need only to develop it. But very few can develop his exceptional skills. However, even though they fell short of his total mastery, if people could develop at least some skill, it would be sufficient for witnessing such things. Instead, being unable to see them, people tend to believe that such phenomena do not actually exist in the world around them. It's difficult to convince people who lack sufficient knowledge of Dhamma for endowing their hearts with a strong spiritual basis. Should our hearts develop the principles of Dhamma, principles certifying the true nature of all phenomena, and gain the necessary skills, then no amount of denial could possibly negate what we clearly see for ourselves. Even if everyone on earth insisted on denying the existence of such things, it would merely be an empty denial. The true nature of what we perceive remains unchanged. Nothing can possibly alter it. Truth does not depend on beliefs or opinions of any kind. It is true according to immutable natural principles. Acariya Mun wandered far and wide throughout most of the remote and mountainous districts of Chiang Mai province, traveling more extensively there than in any other province. He remained in Chiang Mai much longer than he did in other places, largely because it was suitable for meditation. It was conducive to the many kinds of insights that were a unique feature of his practice. He claimed there were many reasons for his long sojourn there. First of all, the environment was suitable to meditation. Secondly, he felt sorry for the hill tribes people who needed his assistance and was reluctant to abandon them. Although it was sparsely populated, many extraordinary individuals lived in that area. They needed proper training and encouragement to ensure their steady progress and to avert disappointment and reversal to their old ways. And then there were all the Devas whom he was determined to assist. Groups of Devas and Nagas usually came to ask questions and listen to his discourses at least twice a month. He said that, at night, he was always busy receiving visitors from all over the celestial and terrestrial realms. Before speaking with Acariya Mun, the leader of each group would announce the approximate number of Devas present on that occasion. For instance, 10 or 100,000 celestial Devas are here today, or 1 to 10,000 terrestrial Devas, or 500 to 1,000 Nagas. Almost daily, when he walked meditation in the late afternoon, Acariya Mun would be informed of the hour of arrival of one group or another from these different realms. Occasionally, he received the information later on during seated meditation. There were nights when several different groups announced their impending visit, and he had to arrange specific times for each group so that their visits did not overlap. He did not have them come simultaneously, because relative spiritual development varied among the different realms, and his Dhamma teachings had to vary accordingly to be appropriate for each group. Since one group preferred hearing a certain aspect of Dhamma, while another group preferred something different, Acariya Mun arranged separate visits to ensure that his discourse was suitable to everyone present. This was done for his own convenience, as well as that of his visitors. Such obligations were a major part of the reason for his long stay in Chiang Mai. As a matter of fact, the number of Devas of all types who visited him there well exceeded the number of people, Nagas, Garudas, and other spirits combined. In reality, very few individuals can achieve telepathic communication with Devas, which is essential for teaching them. Devas often complained to Acariya Mun that, unaware of the existence of Devas, human beings have no understanding about Devas and are not interested in knowing that Devic existence is another state of sentient existence adhering to the principles of Dhamma. Devic existence is irrelevant to most human beings, who fail to recognize that Devas also have hopes and aspirations, just like everyone else. Rarely did Devas encounter a man of supreme virtue, like Acariya Mun, a man who possessed the intuitive insight to realize that animals, humans, Devas, and all other forms of existence are undeniably real and should be honored as such. They could not help feeling an overwhelming sense of joy upon meeting him. They so enjoyed coming to pay him their respects, ask him questions, and listen to his teaching. They wanted to imbibe his exquisite Dhamma to nourish their hearts, thus increasing their happiness and well-being and sustaining their whole existence. For this reason, Devas everywhere venerate anyone possessing extremely high virtue. Relating that Devas are just as important as all other living beings, Acariya Mun understood their intentions and sympathized with their meritorious aspirations. He stated that, intent on improving themselves, the Devas who came to him for assistance greatly outnumbered the human beings who visited him. Still, they remain a mystery to people who lack the proper psychic skills. Though appearing on the surface to be an insoluble problem for human society, it need not be an insurmountable obstacle for a person wishing to truly know and understand these things. For those skilled in the ways of the Chitta, psychic communication is just as normal as any other aspect of human existence. Certainly, Acariya Mun considered it commonplace, allowing him to function effectively with Devas throughout his life. Regardless of where he lived, he always remained in contact with Devas requiring his assistance. This was especially true in Chiang Mai province, because such beings preferred to contact him when he was living in remote, isolated places, free from human congestion. The forests and mountains of Chiang Mai were ideal in this respect. Acariya Mun had few social obligations there, so he could devote more time to his Deva visitors. A strange incident occurred while he was living among the Museor people deep in the mountains near Ikao village. A group of Devas from Germany came to visit him. They wished to hear a discourse that would give them a victory formula. Focusing his chitta on their request, an appropriate Dhamma verse arose. Akgo tena jine go thang. It means, conquer anger with lack of anger. Acariya Mun elaborated on this theme with the assembled Devas. Conquer anger with lack of anger. Remember this. For anyone hoping to achieve victory, this is the most important Dhamma to practice. Consider it well. It is the main source of peace and happiness in the world. Love and kindness. These are an effective deterrence against an evil such as anger. By helping to reduce anger's power to destroy human and Devic societies alike, loving kindness fosters peace and prosperity everywhere. Thus, this loving attitude is a prerequisite for social harmony, one we should all strive to develop. In a world lacking this victory formula, dissatisfaction and unrest will arise at the very least. At the extreme, the world will be consumed by mortal strife. Anger and resentment can never defeat our enemies, for they are evils that succeed only in indiscriminately destroying us and everyone close to us. The more anger is used, the more the world we live in becomes a sea of flames, burning uncontrollably toward total annihilation. Anger is actually a type of fire that's inherent in the nature of this world. Although it has no physical properties, it does succeed in creating havoc in its wake. So anyone desiring a stable, sensible world, a place worth living in, should realize the disastrous harm that the fires of anger and resentment can cause, and refrain from ever using them. Starting a fire like this merely causes oneself and everyone else to suffer. Mutual feelings of affection and loving kindness among all living beings maintain the world in its proper equilibrium. Oppressive forces of unrestrained anger and selfish pride should never be allowed to run rampant, causing a never-ending cycle of destruction. With his acute wisdom, the Lord Buddha realized the indisputable harm caused by anger. He saw the value of loving kindness as a gentle force that can spontaneously join all living beings in a sense of mutual harmony and goodwill, for all share a common desire for happiness and a common dislike of pain. For this reason, he taught that love and kindness were powerful means of maintaining peace and security in the world. So long as living beings still have loving kindness in their hearts, there's every chance that their desire for happiness will be fulfilled. But should their hearts become estranged from thoughts of loving kindness, then even with all the material comforts, their lives will still be devoid of genuine peace and happiness. Angry, hateful people tend to encounter only trouble, feeling resentful and annoyed wherever they go. Once we know with certainty that Dhamma is something truly beneficial to us, we can clearly see that a heart full of brutality is like a blazing fire gradually destroying everything in its path. We must then urgently strive to overcome these dangers as best we can. You may never again get such a good opportunity, so take advantage of it now and avoid regrets in the future. The world is in a constant state of change, and that changing world is situated right here in the bodies and minds of us all. Such was the essence of the victory formula that Acariya Mun gave to the Devas from Germany. As soon as Acariya Mun finished speaking, they gave a thunderous sadhu in unison that echoed throughout the world systems. Acariya Mun asked how they knew where he was staying, since, in human terms, they lived so far away. They replied that they always knew precisely where he was staying. More than that, Devas from Thailand regularly visit the Devas of Germany. In truth, Devas don't consider the distance between countries like Thailand and Germany to be very great, the way human beings do. They simply think of it as an area through which they can easily and naturally pass back and forth. Whereas humans travel by foot or by vehicle, Devas transport themselves by means of a supernormal power that is equivalent to transferring consciousness to a particular destination. It arrives there instantly. So Devas can move around much more easily than human beings. Acariya Mun said that the Devas from Germany regularly came to listen to his Dhamma talks, much in the same way that terrestrial Devas came from all over Thailand to hear him. Both celestial and terrestrial Devas tended to show their respect for him in a similar fashion. If Acariya Mun was living with a group of monks, Devas who came to see him never passed through the area where the monks had their living quarters. Besides that, they tended to arrive very late at night when all the monks were asleep. Upon arrival, they circumambulated Acariya Mun clockwise 3 times in a calm, composed manner. When they departed, again circumambulating him clockwise 3 times, they first withdrew to a respectful distance. When they reached the edge of his living area, they simply floated into the air like puffs of cotton. All types of Devas demonstrated their respect for him in this fashion. Acariya Mun found the mountains of Chiang Mai to be an ideal environment for meditation. Heart-free and mind unencumbered, he lived a life of complete ease, abiding sublimely in Dhamma. Dhamma was the enduring source of comfort in his life. With no intrusions taking up his time, he was free to meditate whenever he wished. He lived a very healthy, contented life there. As for his teaching obligations, the Devas, who came only at night, were beings of a refined nature, so they were hardly a burden. Sometimes in the afternoon or early evening he gave helpful advice to the local lay community. The monks living under his tutelage assembled for instruction in the evening, at about 7 p.m. Most of his students had already achieved a certain level of proficiency in the practice of samadhi and in the various stages of wisdom. Being wholly committed to the practice, they listened to his teaching, striving to attain Magga, Phala, and Nibbana. When Acariya Mun taught a group of monks whose individual levels of mental development varied, he always structured his discourses to encompass all levels of practice, from basic samadhi through the higher levels of wisdom to the most subtle level of all, the realization of Nibbana. Monks skilled in meditation became so absorbed in the successive stages of his discourse that they lost all sense of time and place. Practicing monks were usually given a talk lasting for at least 2 hours.
But the monks were less interested in the time than they were in the flow of his Dhamma discourse, as they were able to gradually increase their own understanding with each successive stage. Consequently, listening to Dhamma in an attentive, thoughtful manner is itself a valuable meditation practice, one that is equally as important as other methods. For his part, the teacher is determined that his audience realize the truth of what he teaches, every step of the way. He points out the kind of thoughts that are truly harmful, as well as those that are truly beneficial, so his students will understand which thinking is faulty and should be abandoned, and which has merit and should be developed further. More than at any comparable time, those focusing their undivided attention on the citta, the focal point of Dhamma, can expect to attain some degree of calm and samadhi, or receive various techniques for investigating with wisdom, while they listen to the teacher discuss these topics. Thus, the diligent meditator can progress step by step while listening to his teacher's instructions, receiving an insight into one aspect of Dhamma today, another aspect of Dhamma tomorrow. Students manage to strengthen their mindfulness and wisdom every time they listen. Since the teacher has realized the truth of Dhamma within himself, he can point directly to that same truth existing within his students. Listening to his detailed explanations, they can progressively develop their skills in all aspects of samadhi and wisdom, allowing them to successfully pass through each level of meditation practice until they reach the highest Dhamma. Thutanga monks have always considered hearing Dhamma an essential part of their practice, one they seek to maintain as long as there is a skilled teacher to whom they can listen. For this reason, truly dedicated Thutanga monks like to search out a teacher who can guide them in their meditation practice. They cherish and revere a teacher in whom they feel they can put their complete trust. His advice is sincerely taken to heart, carefully contemplated, and wholeheartedly put into practice. They routinely consult with him, asking for specific advice on any doubtful points arising in their practice, then adjust their practice according to his recommendations. For this reason, Thutanga monks have always preferred to gather around eminently qualified meditation masters, such as Acariya Mun and Acariya Sao. Both of those great teachers had unusually large numbers of disciples among the Thutanga monks of Thailand's northeast region. But in Acariya Mun's case, once he moved to Chiang Mai, he resolved to avoid his fellow monks and practice deliberately on his own, without the added burden of responsibility that teaching entails. In the beginning, he wanted to accelerate his drive for the ultimate goal. Later, he found it conducive to living in comfort. All the same, he had to accept certain obligations to teach monks as well as lay people, and it's well known that he had many disciples all over Thailand. In the period before Acariya Mun went off alone to make his decisive push in the wilds of Chiang Mai, he often mentioned that spiritually he still was not strong enough, either in his own practice or in his ability to teach others. So he resolved to go away and practice with the utmost diligence until no doubts, of any kind, remained in his heart. From that time on, he never mentioned anything about lacking sufficient strength. Big Brother Elephant. Once Acariya Mun was wandering Thutanga in the Chiang Mai mountains with two other monks, Acariya Kao of Wat Tham Klong Pen Monastery in Udon, Thani province, and Acariya Maha Tongsak of Wat Sutawat Monastery in Sakon Nakhon province. As they reached a narrow gap in the path leading up the mountain, they chanced upon a large, solitary elephant whose owner had released it and then wandered off someplace. All they could see there was a gigantic elephant with huge 6-foot tusks searching for food. Quite a fearsome sight. They conferred among themselves about how to proceed. This was the only path up the mountain, and it allowed no room for going around the elephant. Acariya Mun told Acariya Kao to speak with the elephant, which was eating bamboo leaves at the side of the path. Standing about 20 yards away with its back to them, it had yet to notice their approach. Acariya Kao addressed the elephant. "Big Brother Elephant, we wish to speak with you." At first, the elephant didn't clearly hear his voice, but it did stop chewing the bamboo leaves. "Big Brother Elephant, we wish to speak with you." Clearly hearing this, the elephant suddenly swung around to face the monks. It stood stock still, its ears fully extended. "Big Brother Elephant, we wish to speak with you. You are so very big and strong. We're just a group of monks, so weak and so very frightened of you, Big Brother. We would like to walk past where you're standing. Would Big Brother please move over a bit so that we have room to pass by? If you keep standing there, it really frightens us, so we don't dare walk past." As soon as he finished speaking, The elephant immediately turned to the side and thrust its tusks into the middle of a clump of bamboo, signaling its intention to let them pass unharmed. Seeing it facing the clump of bamboo, Acariya Mun told the others that they could continue on as it would not bother them now. The two monks invited Acariya Mun to walk between them, Acariya Kao walking in front and Acariya Maha Tongsak following behind. They walked past in single file only 6 feet from the elephant's rear end, without incident. But as they were walking away, the hook on Acariya Maha Tongsak's umbrella got tangled by chance in some bamboo just a few yards past the elephant. It defied all attempts to extricate it, so he was forced to struggle with it for quite some time. Terrified of the elephant, which was now looking right at him, he was soon drenched in sweat. Fighting desperately to disentangle the hook, he glanced up at the eyes of the elephant, which stood there like a huge stuffed animal. He could see that its eyes were bright and clear. In truth, its countenance inspired affection rather than fear, but at that moment his fear remained strong. When he finally did get free, his fear subsided, and he realized that this elephant was a very endearing animal. Seeing that they were all safely past, Acariya Kao turned to the elephant. "Hey, big brother, we've all passed by now. Please relax and eat in peace." As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of crunching, breaking bamboo filled the air. Later, the monks praised this intelligent elephant, agreeing it was an animal that inspired affection and sympathy. The only faculty it lacked was the ability to speak. As they were discussing this, Acariya Maha Tongsak was curious to hear Acariya Mun's reaction. So he asked, "Were you able to read that elephant's mind the whole time, from the moment we spoke to it until we passed clear of it? Since it was so endearing, I'd really like to know. When it first heard us call out, suddenly turning around to face us in an agitated fashion, I was sure it was about to charge and crush us to pieces right then and there. But as soon as it understood the situation, it had a change of heart, almost like a person in an animal's body, and quickly thrust its tusks into the middle of that clump of bamboo and stood very still. Clearly it seemed to be telling us, 'You little brothers can come now. Big brother won't do anything. Big brother has put away his weapons. Believe me, come along.'" Acariya Maha Tongsak then teased Acariya Kao. "Acariya Kao is really amazing, speaking with an animal as though it was just another human being. Big brother, your little brothers are frightened and dare not pass. Please make way, so that we can go by without fearing big brother." As soon as it received this bit of flattery, it was so pleased that it immediately prepared to make way for us. But this little brother was really clumsy. I got past big brother, only to get my umbrella hook caught up in the bamboo. Try as I might, I couldn't get it free. It was determined to keep me there with big brother. My heart sank at that moment. I was afraid that big brother wouldn't play fair. Acariya Mun laughed heartily, hearing Acariya Maha Tongsak teasing Acariya Kao about being clever enough to talk to an elephant. He assured them that he had been paying attention to the elephant's mental state. Of course I was focusing my attention there. I've read the minds of birds and monkeys with far less reason than this. This was a matter of life and death. How could I avoid it? Acariya Maha Tongsak wanted to know what the elephant was thinking when Acariya Mun focused on it. When it first heard us, it was startled. That's why it turned around so quickly. It thought only of preparing to fight. But seeing us dressed in yellow robes, it knew instinctively that we could be trusted, for it's quite used to seeing monks. Its owner has long since trained it not to endanger them. So when Acariya Kao addressed it in a pleasant tone, calling it Big Brother, it was hugely pleased and immediately got out of the way. Did it understand every word that Acariya Kao said to it? Of course it did. Otherwise how could it be trained to haul logs down from the mountains? If it couldn't understand, it would probably have been disposed of as useless long ago. This kind of animal must be trained until it knows man's language well before it can be made to perform various tasks. This particular elephant is over 100 years old. Look at its tusks. They're almost 6 feet long. It must have lived among people for a long time. Its owner is relatively young, yet he's still able to drive it to work. How could it not understand human speech? It's certain to have no problem. What was it thinking when it turned and stuck its tusks into the clump of bamboo? Well, it understood the situation, as I said, and so was giving way to us. It didn't think of doing anything else. Did you focus on its mind the whole time we were walking past it? What was it thinking just as we walked by? All I saw was the elephant giving way. It wasn't thinking about anything else. The reason I asked, I was worried that as we were walking past it might have thought it would like to attack us, just for sport, as animals sometimes do. You have an uncommonly prolific imagination, Maha Tongsak. If you enjoyed thinking and asking probing questions like this about matters of substance, then you could certainly expect to transcend dukkha one day. But you're like most people. You insist on wasting your time thinking about inane matters instead of useful ones, and you probably don't care to change. Are you going to keep pondering this matter, asking about that elephant all night without the slightest regard for Dhamma? With this warning, Acariya Maha Tongsak dropped the whole affair. He was afraid that pressing the matter further would result in an even more severe rebuke. Many monks were rebuked for speaking carelessly to Acariya Mun, or speaking without good reason. Some even went mad afterwards. One rather obtrusive monk lived with Acariya Mun for a short while. When Acariya Mun made a comment, this monk liked to chime in, expressing his own views. When he first arrived, Acariya Mun frequently warned him to mind his own business. He advised him to keep a close watch on his thoughts and restrain the impulse to speak out. Monks dedicated to the practice must know how to properly conduct themselves. Those who are mindful will see the inadequacies of a mind that wants to flow out. But it seems that this monk was not as interested as he should have been in Acariya Mun's teaching. Acariya Mun had a unique habit of taking the animals or the people that he encountered on alms round as objects of contemplation, using them to teach the monks walking behind him. He commented out loud on what he observed, as though speaking to no one in particular. One day, he spied a cute little calf playfully running around its mother. At first, it didn't see the monks approaching, but as they came abreast, it looked around startled and raced to its mother's side, nuzzling in under her neck, then peering out to look at the monks with fear in its eyes. Seeing the calf run up to her, the cow quickly turned her head to look in the direction of the monks, then remained impassive, as animals do when they are accustomed to seeing monks daily. But the calf remained under her chin, staring out distrustfully. Observing them, Acariya Mun commented in a general way about the difference between the reaction of the calf and that of its mother. That cow is quite unperturbed, but its calf is so frightened it looks like it wants to pick her up and flee. As soon as it got a glimpse of us, it ran bawling to its mother for help. People are just the same. They rush to find a reliable refuge. If they are near their mother, they will run to her. If they are near their father, they will rush to him. People invariably lean on family and friends for support. Rarely do they think about relying on themselves. When we are young, we expect to rely on other people in one way. When we grow up, we expect to rely on them in another way, and when we grow old, we still expect to rely on others in yet a different way. Very few of us turn inward, looking for support within ourselves. By constantly looking for someone else to lean on, we tend to foster our own weakness, and so never allow ourselves to become truly self-reliant. We monks are the same as lay people. Having ordained, we become lazy about studying. Worrying that it will be painful and difficult, we become lazy about practicing the way. We never seem to finish what we start, for no sooner do we have a good idea and begin to put it into practice than laziness creeps in, blocking our progress. Lacking the ability to help ourselves, we have to look to others for support. Otherwise, we couldn't carry on in this life. The maxim, atta hi attano natho, oneself is one's own refuge, is meaningless for us if we cannot breathe through our own noses. Dhutanga monks who are dedicated to the practice shouldn't always have to depend on others for life and breath. Listen to your teacher, think about what he teaches, and commit yourselves to attaining it. Don't let his teaching just slip through your grasp to no avail. Be persistent. Consider what he says and follow his example until you see the benefits within yourselves. Then you no longer need to lean on him for support. You'll be breathing through your own noses, meaning you will have developed the knowledge and wisdom needed to rid yourselves of dukkha. Gradually, you will become more confident, more self-reliant, until finally you become full-fledged, fully independent monks in your own right. Acariya Mun brought up this matter to give the monks on alms round with him something to contemplate. As he paused for a moment, the rather obtrusive monk began to prattle away on his own without considering the impropriety of such an intrusion. Perhaps this monk's idiocy struck a dissonant chord deep within Acariya Mun, for he turned around and gave him a severe rebuke that took the other monks aback, making them all somewhat apprehensive. "You must be mad! You're like a rabid dog that pounces and chews furiously on any old piece of wood tossed at it. Why don't you look inside yourself? where this madness arises. You'll go crazy if you don't curtail this sort of mindless prattle." Acariya Mun then turned around and walked back to the monastery without another word. Arriving at the monastery, the monks noticed something peculiar about the obtrusive monk. He seemed stunned, eating very little. Seeing his odd behavior, the monks kept quiet, as if nothing had happened. They were afraid he would feel embarrassed. For the rest of the day, life in the monastery continued as normal, each monk applying himself to his meditation. But later, during the night, when all was quiet, they heard someone cry out in a deranged, incoherent voice. They immediately rushed over to find the monk lying in his hut, tossing deliriously about, mumbling something about being sorry for offending Acariya Mun so rudely. Shocked by this sight, some of them hurried off to get the local villagers to help take care of him. They brought some herbal remedies for him to take, then massaged his limbs for a while, until he finally calmed down and fell asleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, someone took him to a doctor for treatment. His condition soon improved, though he did have occasional relapses. When he was well enough to travel, they sent him home. There was no further news about his condition after that. Acariya Mun's reprimands varied with circumstances. A mild scolding was usually sufficient to promote mindfulness in the present and increase vigilance in the future. However, if someone did something that prompted a severe reprimand, but lacked the good judgment to make use of it, then it could well be damaging, as we have seen. So monks living with Acariya Mun tended to be exceedingly vigilant and always self-controlled. Just because they had lived with him for a long time didn't mean they could expect to get overly familiar with him, for he was the type of person who didn't readily countenance familiarity in anyone. His students could never afford to be complacent. Sometimes even the deer that's wary of hunters gets shot.